Hi, it's Bumble. Welcome back to my channel. So I wrote down a bunch of notes. I don't think I'm gonna go through all of them. So I remember when I was watching the Kingsmen movies earlier, to do some reviews for this channel. Well, that's not the reason I was watching, but it was kind of the reason I kept going with these. I had said that I wished that I had watched this one first. I'm actually okay with having watched this one last. Because since I have now on the second rewatch of the whole series, I've watched these pretty much back to back. Like the other two I watched I think a day apart or something like that. And this one was like a week later, but the other ones are still fresh in my mind, so I was able to like kind of catch more of the references as I was going through that, I didn't catch the first time because, I was watching these as they came out. I think it gave more meaning to some things. I feel kind of mixed on this movie. I'm gonna start with that. It's kind of one of those prequels that's weird to watch, where it feels like it's such a completely different tone from the other movies, and they only feel like a little bit connected, that I want to say that as a movie that's part of the series, I kind of don't really care for it as much. It feels too different. It feels like it's not really part of the same series, so it's kind of weird, because I mean it is important because it's the origin story of the Kingsman group and stuff for the other movies. And even the ending of this one basically shows how they establish everything. But then the rest of the movie, it's there's only two spots in this movie where I thought okay, this feels like I'm watching a Kingsman movie, and it was because of the fighting, where the fighting kind of felt the same. Or there was one section of the movie actually, it's right before the middle, it's when they're doing the stuff with Rasputin, that felt okay, this feels like it's a Kingsman movie, and then the rest of the time it felt like its own thing. And I feel mixed with that, because I'm happy and also disappointed that it's so different from the others. It basically stands by itself. Because if it wasn't connected to the other ones at all, that series could still exist. The series could still exist, but if this was just a separate, its own thing, not related to the series, I'd say I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it as its own thing. I think slightly less than when I watched it the first time, but I still really, really enjoyed it. But as connected to the other ones, it's it feels like it's from a completely different thing. So I don't know if I should say as a prequel, if I think it failed in doing its job as that, because it does what it's supposed to, based on the they give very little background for the Kingsmen organization in the first movie. They have a couple lines that explain the backstory, and that is kind of basically sums up this one of why they started the organization, of saying. And the funny thing is, with that knowledge, remembering that knowledge spoils stuff for this movie. It's kind of weird, because they say stuff about our founders, they lost their sons in the war, World War One, and then with nobody to inherit their money, because it was all of these aristocrats and stuff, they put their money into creating the Kingsmen organization. And that's exactly what happens, because the main character is this Duke of Oxford, and that little backstory kind of spoils what his character goes through in this movie, where his son eventually ends up enlisting in the war and dies in that war. No one's left to inherit the money, and the money gets put, he's the guy that creates the Kingsman organization, basically. But I mean, this movie does kind of expand on that, of more of the reasons why, in terms of this character, of it's more of he was already doing spy stuff anyway, and then at the end of the movie is using this money to formally create the organization. But he's basically doing the stuff that like the Kingsmen were already doing, just like a smaller scale and out of like a secret room in a study or something. But yeah, that's what I just kind of wanted to start off with. Of like, it's kind of weird for me to talk about this one where it's like connected to the other movies. I prefer the other ones. And that's what makes it hard too. They just feel so different. Where the other movies, they're like spy movies. They do occasionally have their like serious moments about stuff, or some of the issues the characters go through. But for the most part, they're like pretty lighthearted, where they can be like a bit campy. They like parody the spy genre. If anything, it feels like the second movie's kind of poking fun at the first movie, and that one's already just like the sequel, you know? This is a war drama. This isn't a spy movie. Well, it's, also because they don't have the spy organization up and running at the point when the story takes place, and they're sort of doing spy stuff anyway. But yeah, no, this is this is a war drama. This is actually pretty heavy and has like a very serious tone, like completely different tone from the Kingsman movies. They don't have like any of the fun weapons. You do get to see people like die on the battlefield. It has this very like heavy tension throughout the film, there's only like a small portion of the movie I'd say that matches like the Kingsman tone, but like as its own movie, I got really into it, especially I think the last like 20-30 minutes or so I got like really into it. Not saying like I loved it or anything, but I enjoyed it. I still kind of have my issues with some things though, so I'll start getting into that. Some of it's just stuff I don't have in my notes. Like at the beginning of the movie, they show this like British concentration camp. That part was kind of confusing. It's supposed to be this backstory stuff of like how the main character, I don't remember, I think his name's like Orlando Oxford or something, but I just wrote Oxford in my notes, so I'm going to refer to him that way as the main character. It's about him, this backstory of him losing his wife and promising her to like make sure their son never sees war or something. But they show like these people being kept in a concentration camp, and there's like these enemy soldiers or something. I don't remember where they're from that show up. I thought they were there to like liberate those people that are being like kept there. It's like in South Africa or something. I wasn't completely sure in their motives. I was assuming that was it, but then like the movie treats it as a bad thing, and that was kind of weird to me. I guess it is because like like British people are the main character in these and stuff, but and it's another thing that's also kind of hard for me to talk about this movie of like I'll be honest, I don't really remember much about like stuff from World War One. I feel like this is one of those movies where it's like the more you know the historical background, the more you either appreciate it or get more invested into it. Like there was like some stuff I kind of remembered from like history class, but not really that much. So I can't say of remembering like how historically accurate anything in this movie is, but I will say it felt like a lot of stuff, especially the villains were, I'm assuming, or just kind of gave that vibe of being like very exaggerated. It was kind of weird, especially because like the main villain, I really like the main villain. He's just called the Shepherd throughout the movie, but there's a reason why you don't learn his like actual name until the end. I have more notes on him, but he has this like group of followers he refers to as his flock, and it's all of these like historical like people and leaders and stuff. But it feels kind of weird, almost a little, excuse me, silly. Um, like it was I'm trying to think of the way to explain this. It was kind of like, what is it? It was another movie I talked about on here, Night at the Museum 2, where they round up all the villains throughout history. Um, I I don't know if this is gonna sound weird, and I'm trying to just go off from what I remember. I feel like Night at the Museum 2 handled that concept, or was it the second or the third? Doesn't matter. It's the one with Amelia Earhart, I think. I think that movie handled that concept better of like the evil league of historical villains or something better than this movie. I don't know. This movie kind of gave me like MCU sort of vibes. Like it tried to be that big, and the way it had it's especially its like villains and stuff. But it felt kind of in trying to also have that kind of drama. But it felt kind of weird because it's also like these characters or stuff, or the villains are not really like characters. It's like I mean they are in the sense of the movie, but like, you know, because it's a movie, but they're all like real people. So to give it that sort of like MCU treatment, I'm just kind of generalizing that, but it's like the term I'm thinking of right now. Just felt really weird. I didn't really care for that. What was the, especially at the end? Oh my gosh, no. Because this movie is so weird, where it's like, and I'm gonna talk about. I'll go more into depth with it at the end, but the last like 20 to 30 minutes, like I mentioned, it's really good. And then and then the credits start, and you get the mid-credits scene, which feels the most out of like Marvel or something out of this movie. But with what it reveals in that, I literally stopped watching the credits. I'm like, okay, I'm done. I can't. This is getting like too ridiculous or whatever. But like once I talk about that scene, I think you'll understand more my point with this about the villains and stuff. But yeah, it felt weird because it's like they're real people and stuff that it's like based on, but in the movie it's treated as like this shepherd guy and his flock as this like shadowy organization that's like pulling the strings of like everything in World War One or whatever. And I'm trying to think of the best way to describe this. It felt like it was kind of minimizing like the actual things people like went through back then. It wasn't taking that stuff seriously was the thing. And also just kind of like the genre of the movie felt kind of weird to me too. I feel like it just kind of needed to pick a genre, pick a tone. Because it's like you have this stuff with Rasputin, which, like I mentioned, felt the most like out of the Kingsmen movie, and I'm going to talk about that in my notes. And I had my point. I'm trying to remember what it was. And that was it was really weird, and it felt like, okay, it's like the fun spy vibes of like the Kingsmen movies and stuff. But then the rest of the movie is like really slow and really serious, and then you get to the parts where it like actually shows like the characters like in the trenches in World War One, and then it's sort of like a war drama. And I just feel like the movie needs to commit to one or the other. I feel like it kind of, and then the rest of the and that's like a very little part of it, of like the main character's son doing that stuff. Or even that part of the movie, it's like very short, but that felt like I was in a completely different movie. And then the rest of the movie, it goes from like being a drama to being like action. It just felt like it was just trying to be a lot of things at once, and I feel like it just needed to like pick a lane or something. But yeah, those are like kind of my main things, sort of issues and stuff. They might pop up more in my notes. I want to kind of get into it now. Okay, there was like, I'm actually glad this one wasn't like super heavy in references to the other Kingsman movies. Like in those movies, they say the thing about like Oxfords, not rogues. And I think in those movies it refers to like shoes or something. But then with this one, it's referring to people and characters because like the main character's name is Oxford. And they have that Oxford's not rogues thing is like, because the main character, I think he was actually one of my favorite things about the movie. He's this pacifist who had actually like fought before and then kind of was questioning what he was fighting for and if it was worth it. And then from then on becomes like a pacifist, but he still fights like a little bit, but he sort of becomes like a spy, and he has this relationship with his son of being like overprotective, and that is also kind of a driving thing in the movie. I'll get more into it with my notes. And then there's like a couple of other people, because the main character is sort of in this like, if we're comparing it to the other Kingsman movies, like he becomes the sort of like Arthur character, like the head at the end of the movie, but throughout the movie he's basically like the first Kingsman agent, and then there's like a couple of people that are also with him. There's this nanny character named Polly, and I thought she was really cool. It was kind of, I was thinking about the other movies and I was like, damn, there isn't really that many female characters in terms of like main ones in those. And I was thinking like Polly's such a cool character in this and like an important part of the movie, and then it like bummed me out of like the only like two main female characters I could think of, and I might be forgetting people, was like the villain of the second movie, and then there's this agent named Roxy who's in the first two, but mostly the first one because they like kill her off at the beginning of the sequel. We don't really get to see her do much, so it's just kind of like, dang. Enough time had passed since the first time I had watched this movie. There was actually a couple of things I forgot about. Like out of the villains, like flock and stuff, because that's literally what they call it in the movie. Rasputin's the one that like I think gets the most screen time, and in terms of like who the main characters have to fight. I think most of my notes are about that section of the movie because that's the one, like I mentioned, that's the most like Kingsman. I had misremembered a lot of things about this movie. I thought that Rasputin was like the main villain, but because that's the part of the movie I remembered the most, but no. Actually I want to talk about the shepherd first. He's the main villain. He's one of those things, part of the reason I feel like this movie has like such a different vibe to like the other ones, because if you just compare like the main villains of the three movies, it's like Valentine and Poppy. I mean, they do have really big ambitions of like world dominating type stuff, but they're both very like they're horrible people, and what they plan to do is like their villain plan is like really messed up things, but like they're both so like cheerful in attitude and stuff, and it fits these more like kind of comedic movies and stuff, but it feels almost like their hench people are like more threatening in a way. I don't really know how to explain it, and the main characters don't really get into, I think from what I remember, into like physical fights with either of the main villains at the end. Actually, I don't remember if they fight Poppy or not. I'm like blanking on that. I think it's like very short. I don't remember them fighting Valentine at all. But yeah, they're like very cheerful people. You get to see them kind of throughout the movie. They have like some comedic moments with their like henchmen and stuff. And then comparing that to the shepherd in this movie, where you don't actually, well, he does have a big plot twist associated with him is the thing, but ignoring that plot twist, if that didn't exist and the movie was still filmed the same way and stuff with the cameras and everything, It would just be adding to like making him seem more threatening, where they don't actually show his face. It's just like the back of his head, and you hear his voice. Even his, I mean, with the plot twist, even his voice is different as well. But he actually and I'll go into that later in my notes when I like kind of get to that part. He actually feels like way more threatening than like the other two villains and stuff. Even the moments where it's like him and his flock, he's like very like aggressive with them and stuff. Because the plan, it's weird. It's like the plans for the villains in the other two movies almost make me think of something like a Bond villain would try to pull off, where it is like horrible things of like what they plan to do, where it'll immediately affect like the entire population of Earth or whatever. Like I think in the first one it was like reducing people to like a savage state, like monkey brains, sort of be that kind of aggressive. And then I think with the second one it was something to do with drugs, where it was like causing only the drug users to die to like control the drug market or something. And then with this one it was like, okay, we're gonna get revenge on the English, and we're gonna literally start World War One and control it, and we're gonna get our people into like controlling certain countries. I think they were gonna pick the villain was gonna like try to pick the next American president or something, and it's like comparing those, even though they all three of those have like disastrous consequences for like the world. I think the one where it's like literally starting a world war, just something about that feels like way more threatening than the other two plots. I don't know. I think maybe because it like feels more real, maybe also because like the time period the movie takes place in. And then they do actually get to fight the main villain in this one. It's a sword fight. I really like that sword fight. There's no like even fancy gadgets or anything. It's literally just two people with swords. They're fighting in like this old barn and stuff. It's funny where it's like, in a way, everything's more simplistic in that sense with like the weapons, or you know, the villains don't have all this crazy technology or whatever, but it still feels like it's higher stakes. But I think the villain was part of like the main reason I really liked this. But the stuff that they show for World War One, I thought was also pretty good. Like, they have a montage, because the war doesn't start immediately. It, like, takes a while into this movie. But they show this like, very brief little, like, montage. I don't think that's the right word for it. Where it shows, like, the environmental damage that's done from the war, and how the environment transforms into the, you know, like, the trenches and everything. And I don't think it shows like the bodies, but it shows like the buildings, you know, being destroyed and stuff. That was pretty crazy. And then the scenes in the trenches, I actually want to talk about that, so I'm going to scroll. I have to like scroll all the way down. Oh right, I feel like I should probably explain that part. Yeah. I feel like I need to just, at this point, just talk about the main character and his dead wife and the son, because that's, like, the key. It's, like, this entire really long, like, domino effect, basically, where I mentioned the main character. He loses Oxford. He loses his wife at the beginning of the movie and promises to, like, keep his son out of, like, any war. And then, like, World War One is approaching, and he's doing everything in his power to keep his son from... His son's, like, I think 18 or 17 or 18 or something, and the son, like, really, really wants to fight in the war to, like, serve his country and stuff. And the main character, he does, like, kind of confess to his son. I don't think he ever tells him... I was, like, waiting for it in the movie, too, of, like, the promise I made to your mom about keeping you out of the war. I mean, that is, I think, kind of his main reason, but he also has like some other reasons of wanting to keep his son out. And I like this little speech that Oxford gives about where he gives his like personal experience with like combat and trying to explain the like why he's a pacifist and what it means to like actually take a life. And his son doesn't really get it, even when Oxford's saying about realizing that like his own fighting was pointless, and he gets a medal for it and says how he wishes he got a medal. There was something about that I was just thinking about for the rest of the movie, of the main character saying like, oh, I wish I got a medal for serving in the Red Cross rather than for the lives that I took. I was just kind of thinking about that. I don't know. And it's like, I get why the son wants to like fight for his country and like enlist and stuff, but it's also that there's a lot of people, soldiers and stuff. I noticed when they had the like they showed a little bit of the combat training and stuff, that it's all like really young men, which I mean, as it is, it probably should be. Those probably would be the best fighters, but at the same time it's like people that are like barely 18, or they mentioned in the movie people that are like teenagers that are lying about their age, that are wanting to like join and stuff. And I was thinking about it and I was like, damn, these are like really young, not even like young adults, like, or even barely young adults that have like no prior combat experience whatsoever, that are joining this war where it's having weapons and stuff. And they literally described the war as like, which is probably why I'm assuming it's called World War One. Like I said, I don't really remember much about learning about World War One. I feel kind of bad because like the more, like I said, the more you understand about it, the more the movie like makes sense and stuff. Where they say something of like, this war is like nothing we've ever seen before, and it's like no wonder, as you see in the movie, people are just like constantly dying out there, and you can understand like that is part of the reason the main character just does not want his son out there and everything. And luckily he's in this position because he's a duke, of being able to like personally tell people to like keep my son out of this, don't let him actually go. And the only reason the son actually gets to go and then dies on the battlefield, which ends up being a like irony actually, is because he swaps places with someone, and then the people in the trenches think that he's a spy, and they like literally shoot him. And if he didn't have to lie about his identity, he wouldn't have gotten shot there. I mean, he maybe also could have just like died out on the battlefield, like getting shot by the enemy or something. That could have happened too, but and that, but it's kind of crazy. Like one of the scenes I was also still thinking about, right before the son gets killed, is he ends up, I think, barely surviving something, and he's like crying, and he meets this guy who's also part of the British Army. At first I thought the guy was going to be revealed to be a spy, because he has like the Union Jack, I think, covering part of the upper part of his leg, because he's like, I think, almost completely missing the leg. Those scenes are like really dark because they're taking place at night, so it's kind of hard for me to see. And Conrad's like crying, the son, and the guy's telling him like, hey, come here, and he's like kind of holding him, being like, it's okay. And it's like this sort of soft moment before things get really crazy, and Conrad's crying about how he thought he knew what he wanted, and he wished he had listened to his dad, and how he didn't listen. I just thought it was like a really strong scene of him realizing like how it actually is on the battlefield and stuff. And I was worried for a second. I thought the guy, was luring him because he was saying like, hey, come here, especially because they've been talking about spies. a different part of the movie, like in the actual battlefield, not like spies as in like Kingsman type spies. Um, and I thought the guy was gonna like lure in Conrad and then like shoot him or something, but then Conrad ends up carrying the guy to base. That's what's kind of sad. He carries the guy to base. He has this like vital info that he needs to get to like the government or something, and then they end up shooting him, thinking that he's a spy, because he can't give them like his actual name or anything, because he's pretending to be someone else, not for malicious reasons, but literally just so he could join the war. And then I forgot about that, like after I think they do eventually figure out Conrad's identity and stuff when he's like buried, and how he's basically a hero and was able to accomplish like the things that the dad and his like spy network basically were trying to accomplish. The main character becomes like really depressed and then realizes he has to like kind of take his son's place in a sense, not like literally like joining into the battlefield or anything, but kind of like be the person your son was trying to be. And then from there, Oxford like really becomes more of the main character because he's like having to fight and stuff and breaking his like personal vow of pacifism, and then it's that point where it like really kind of feels more like Kingsman, of having like the suits and stuff, and they're like really trying to like fight people. But let me go back to the beginning. I just wanted to talk about that part because I thought that was like really strong, the whole like Conrad in the battlefield and stuff. But again, that part, that's the part where it feels the most like a war drama, and that's the portion where it feels like, oh right, I'm supposed to be watching a Kingsman movie. Like you forget about it. It feels like it's from a different movie, not just because this doesn't feel like a Kingsman movie, but it is one, but also it doesn't even feel like it's part of the movie that it's a part of. It's kind of funny. What else? I have like way too many things written down. The locations in this movie are really cool. I was watching this by myself. I was on the big TV, as I call it, because it's the biggest TV in the house. It's one that we have downstairs. But then my parents were coming in occasionally, and even my mom was looking over and being like, damn, this places look really cool. Like they show this like Russian palace. I don't know what the actual building is called, where there's this Christmas party that takes place. It's so fancy looking. There's like gold walls and stuff. That was really cool. There's just a lot of cool locations for this movie in general. I feel like I need to like look up where half of them are, where it's showing these like palaces and stuff, because you see so many of these like world leaders, specifically the ones at the time for Russia, Germany, and Britain, and what was I going to say? Because those are the three countries that are like the most involved in with the war and everything in this. And we do see a little bit of the U.S., of like the White House and stuff. The way the Americans are portrayed in this are like kind of funny to me. I don't know how accurate it is, like I said, to like world history, where the English main characters, they're trying to get these messages to the U.S. president, of trying to get America to join the war, and the president is just like, nope, I need, like they work out this like coded telegram or something that would normally get America to join the war, and the president sees it and is like, yeah, no, I need like more concrete evidence than this. And then it turns out he's being blackmailed by someone in like the flock. And then when they finally destroy that evidence, not even when they destroy the villain, but when they finally just destroy that evidence, it's supposed to be that America joins the war, because then it cuts to like the war is over and it has the victory thing and stuff. It's such like a fast cut as well, where it's kind of like, okay, they win and everything's like fine now, but it's crazy because like if they join sooner, I mean, the main characters still would have had to like kill the shepherd guy. I mean, that probably wouldn't have stopped everything with the war. I mean, he was like the guy pulling all the strings with it. Um, but still, it's kind of crazy. Oh yeah, something else I wanted to say about Conrad. I felt kind of bad for him as a character too. Of like again, I get why he wants to enlist as a soldier and stuff. But I was thinking throughout the movie, once I remembered like how he dies, because it kind of the memory came back as I was watching the movie. I was thinking like, dang, if he just had remained as a spy, everything would have worked out fine. Because he like criticizes his dad throughout the movie of like you're not doing anything and stuff, and then he learns of his dad's basically operating like the Kingsmen organization within their part of their study and stuff, and basically doing the same like spy work and everything, and they're getting I think even more kind of more involved in even like the soldiers and stuff that it's almost a little frustrating to watch of like especially because you get to see him work with his dad. It's like this one specific mission when they're like trying to take down Rasputin, where it's like everything worked so well for the characters in a sense of the way they work together. That could have been a nice way for Conrad to like still be involved and especially even more so with the political stuff, but not having to join out on the battlefield. Oh yeah, slight change of topic. They mentioned about statesmen. They're the American equivalent of the kingsmen that are introduced in the second movie. Wait, not chronologically, but I mean like, what is it called? Kingsman: The Golden Circle. The one with the drug stuff and Poppy. It's weird to refer to like the first one, the second one, because like in terms of when the movies came out, this is the third one, but chronologically this is the first one because it's the prequel. So but they mentioned about statesmen, not the organization but the drink. They mentioned it a couple times, and because I just watched the second movie, it like I was like, oh yeah, it proves that during that same time period. Well, I'm assuming that the organization probably doesn't exist yet. It's probably just still like they're making booze and stuff. But that was kind of cool because they specifically mentioned about the drink and everything. They have, let me see what else. They have that line of the looking better, feeling better when the dad finally sobers up and basically becomes the first Kingsman agent. That was kind of nice. Even has like basically the umbrella, like it kind of works the same. I mean, except without the whole bulletproof thing, because yeah, they don't have that kind of technology when this movie takes place, but it's instead a cane, but it kind of it's a cane, but it kind of just works as a sword, but it looks similar enough to the umbrella from the other movies. It like kind of works the same, so that was kind of cool. Because that's the other thing with this one is like the weapons are so different, where they don't have like the bulletproof stuff or like the super fancy gadgets or anything. Okay, I want to talk about the end of the movie now, actually. Like I said, last half an hour was really cool. I think basically from the point when they're trying to head to the villain's lair and stuff, which is on this like cliff, Oxford has to go in this airplane, and the airplane, it doesn't crash, but like he falls out of it, I don't remember how, and then has to like use a parachute to get to the villain's hideout, which is just like this old barn in the middle of I don't even remember where it is. It basically looks like it's almost in the middle of nowhere because it's just on this giant cliff. It almost looks like a floating island in a way. And he's like about to land on the cliff and ends up going a different way and gets attacked. There's like all these like sheep and stuff. I thought the sheep were pretty cool actually. Or I think they were sheep. They had like really big horns. But yeah, everything from that point when he's like flying the plane and falls out of the plane till basically till they right before they kill the villain, I'll say, was just really good, and I have to mark it at that point because you'll see why. But yeah, the shots of like trying to land on the cliff after falling out of the plane was really cool. Um, and then the final sword fight. No, there's like a couple of like little fights before that with just like some of the henchmen and stuff. Uh, okay. It was later in my notes. I was trying to remember. There's a character named Shola, because it's him, Polly, and Oxford. I talked about Polly a little bit. I feel like Shola and Polly are kind of opposites, where it's like Polly doesn't get any fights, but she gets a lot of dialogue, and Shola has some really good fights. I think one of them's a sword fight, and the other's with like knives or something. And both those fights were really cool. I just wish they had more to do, in the sense that like he barely has any lines. I feel like him and Polly, they almost feel like they're split into two different characters, where one of them does a lot of fighting and one of them has a lot of dialogue and talks to Oxford a lot, where I almost wish they were either like used more evenly, like balanced, or if they were just merged into one character. I mean, they kind of can't be, because like once they start the Kingsmen organization at the end of the movie, Shola becomes like Merlin, like originating that role. Actually, I think she's either one of the agents or not seen. There was someone who was at the table that looked like her, but everyone's like wearing glasses at that point. I couldn't tell if it was supposed to be her or not, where she becomes Galahad. But I just assumed it was her. But it's funny that like Shola originates that like Merlin role, because I was thinking of the guy that plays Merlin, or that role. I don't know why I'm blanking on names right now from the other Kingsman movies, because he ends up being an important character in both the other movies, and he has a lot of lines and stuff with Eggsy, but then Shola isn't really in that Merlin role in this movie of being like the quartermaster. He just like pops up occasionally, and I think is kind of mostly missing in like the middle of the movie, and I was bummed because he has a lot of cool fights. He seems like a cool character, but yeah, I just feel the way some of the side characters were handled, I think could have been better. What else? Okay, so they have this main plot twist, because throughout the movie we see these flashes of the villain. He's called the Shepherd. He has this like really heavy Scottish accent. Or actually, I don't know if it's really heavy. I don't really listen to like a lot of Scottish people, honestly. It's probably just, normal. And the big plot twist when they finally show his face is that he's this guy named Morton, who was like the assistant or whatever to this guy who has like a really important position in the English government or something. And you actually see Morton in the beginning of the movie, and part of the reason you can't really recognize him when he's like the villain, like as the villain, doing villain stuff, I should say, is because he wears a wig and he's just disguised as like an Englishman. When you see his face on screen at like the beginning of the movie, I actually forgot about him. Was the funny, like I remember that there was a plot twist with the villain, I just couldn't remember what it was, because they have Morton, he disappears at some point in the movie, and you just don't see him again until the end, and I just forgot about him, and it's probably supposed to be like that because there's so many things going on in the movie after that. But you never, he should be sus because you never really find out his deal. It's basically that he's with the person he works for, and then he goes outside, and then the ship that they were on blows up, and you're probably just supposed to assume he died, but then you see like a little flashback thing when the villain's revealed or whatever, and it shows him escaping in a boat. I thought the thing was Morton was gonna be, like, I remembered there was a plot twist with the villain. I remembered Morton's not who he says he is. I thought it was going to be that Morton was going to be revealed to, like, I just assumed he was working with the villain the whole time. Like, he was just another hench person, and that he, like, maybe did die, or maybe he left and escaped the boat and went to, like, the barn where everything takes place. But no, he was the villain the entire time. I didn't really care about that plot twist. I feel like almost didn't really like it. I feel like it was supposed to be like a big plot twist and stuff. The movie actually doesn't seem to treat it as important as I thought it would. But also, I feel like it didn't really affect things too much. I mean, it makes sense how because he recognizes the main character instantly, where he's just basically like, are you fucking kidding me? It's you of all people that's showing up, because, you know, Oxford's, like, known by the other characters as being, like, a pacifist and stuff. So he'd be, like, the last person you'd expect to show up to, like, go fight the villain or whatever. But I feel like it didn't really change anything with like, we already knew, like, from other scenes in the movie that what he's really wanting with World War One is to destroy England because of the English oppression of Scotland. That makes sense. And that doesn't really change with anything with this reveal at all. So I feel like it didn't need to be there. I mean, I guess it kind of makes sense, because throughout the movie you're wondering, like, okay, who is this guy that's, like, pulling all these strings and, like, causing the First World War and stuff. I feel like he could have just... I feel like Morton could have just, like, you know, as Morton, if they were, like, separate characters or something, and they could have just done whatever with Morton and just have the main villain just be, like, his own character. I feel like that almost would have felt better. I felt like the plot twist just didn't really need to exist. I mean, maybe I'm not really understanding it as well. I don't know. Oh yeah, they also have the manners make its man line. It's kind of funny because I'm so used to that being used by the main characters in the other Kingsman movies, but here it's used by the villain, where he does try to act a bit like a gentleman, or saying that he does, or whatever. I mean, his actions definitely are not that way, you know, with what he's doing, but he has the manners make it man line. I'd almost forgotten about that, actually. What else? And then that's pretty much it. I already kind of described the ending. Oh, yeah, the guy that Conrad trades places with, the one... he basically got to live, I think, because Conrad traded places with him where he didn't end up in the war. He ends up joining the Kingsmen organization. He ends up, I think, being Lancelot. So that's kind of cool that he, you know, basically takes Conrad's place in the sense where, like, Conrad probably would have been the first Lancelot and everything. I think they also have, because you get to see the inside the Kingsman tailor shop with the, like, the meeting room and stuff once the organization's established. They show a photo of someone. I think it's supposed to be Conrad. It's like this, like, oil painting and stuff. And now I want to go back to Kingsman, the other ones, not to, like, really rewatch them, but now I'm like, has that painting been there the whole time? Has there just been a painting of Conrad and I've never noticed? Was this entire origin story created just to explain who the person in that painting was, you know? Which I find that kind of interesting if it was the same painting there all the time, because, like, you would mistake that of, like, Conrad being the founder, but it's more like the organization is almost created in his honor, and the actual founder, you know, is his dad, who I didn't really talk much. I said I was going to, and then I didn't. It's fine. I think I just kind of want to finish this, if anything. I have 2 more notes. One of them is more important than the other. Credits. We got to talk about the credits. Credits music, I feel like I get what they were going for, but I feel like it didn't really fit. The credits music, I don't know who the singer was I don't know what the song was. Let me start with that. In my opinion, I feel like it should have been something more serious instead of a pop song. It's got these like Bond instruments, like James Bond kind of instruments, as I'll call it. I feel like they're trying to make it sound like a Bond theme song, but it's like too peppy. I mean, okay, to be fair, Bond's theme song, I know most people probably think of like, in the popular culture and the known stuff, um, of like ballads and stuff. There are a lot of ballads, in terms of Bond theme songs. But it's funny, there's also ones that are like really peppy and upbeat as well. It's kind of surprising. But the Bond theme songs, especially if you include the rejected ones, but the ones that are in the Eon movies in general, very much range from being like these moody ballads to rock and roll to all kinds. I could actually feel like I could make like a whole speech about that. Really, that would actually be a fun video. But I'm not gonna do that. It's like a whole range, but most people associate it with these like moody ballads. That's kind of the direction the newer Bond movies have been going as well. So I feel like the credits, if I had to guess, the credits music in this movie was kind of going for that vibe, especially when I was paying attention to the lyrics and the way the singer was kind of holding on to notes, and the instruments felt kind of Bond-like, but it felt too peppy to be like a Bond ballad with the type of Bond ballad they're trying to go for. Like, it was a good song, whatever it was. Like, the lyrics I think fit, kind of. It's just that I'm trying to think of how to explain this, because the Bond movies, they also range from being very silly to being very serious. Especially the newer ones are very serious, like the Daniel Craig ones. But this is a more serious movie than the other Kingsman movies. Basically, a war drama. And if you think of it just as a war drama and not as a spy movie, because I mean, Kingsman's a spy genre, but this isn't really like a spy movie. I feel like and especially because this one has like a very heavy tone overall, I feel like the music should have just been more sad sounding. Like, I feel like that's actually something that kind of bothers me when you're watching like a very serious movie and then they have like a very peppy song at the end. Sometimes it works, of like it kind of lifts everything up at the end, kind of takes away some of the moodiness you might be feeling from the movie. But when it's like a really serious movie, especially if it's like war movies and stuff, I feel like it's just kind of more fitting if it's kind of a bit more, not like it has to be a sad song, but just like just something more kind of subtle, somber. I like if you had like just like an instrumental or something. I feel like if anything, that kind of can hammer in that like serious tone. I mean, this isn't as serious as like movies where it's entirely about war. I mean, this one sort of is, but not really. And it has like the exaggeration of all the like political figures and stuff, where I feel like it's not like serious 100%, but yeah, I feel like the credits music should have been different. I do want to look up the song though. It was good. I get sort of what I think they were trying to go for. It didn't work. And then what really bothered me, and I'm like, okay, if you're trying to bounce back into Kingsman more lighthearted vibe, this ain't it. What the fuck was with that mid-credits scene with the MCU introduction style of Hitler, of all people? Like the actual guy. Not like I mean, he was probably a parody character, but with the actual name and everything. Were they setting up like a sequel to this? Or something? Because this is already a prequel. I don't, depending on what it is, because I remembered about Star Wars just now. I feel like prequels don't really need sequels, especially because like Kingsman already has, like, the first Kingsman has its own sequel, and this was kind of like, this was a cool movie. I at least thought it was cool, but it's kind of an unnecessary sequel. Um, if you like connect it to the other ones, I feel like this one didn't need a sequel. Even if it was its own movie and not part of the like Kingsman franchise, which like I said, it could easily be if you just like kind of, excuse me, remove some if you basically get rid of the ending or change a couple things, it very well could just be its own movie. Even if that was the case, I feel like it wouldn't need a sequel. But yeah, the mid-credit scene, it's weird. I don't know what those type of introductions are called exactly, but I know they sort of started with like the Marvel movies where it's like they'll introduce the villain for the next movie in the credits, and it's like very dramatic where you see like their silhouette and they're like, oh, who are you? What's your name? And they give it their name, and it's supposed to be like, it's this person. This person's gonna be the villain for the next movie. I feel like that could work for Kingsman with the other Kingsman movies. If they like, let's say they did that for the first Kingsman or something, that could work because like those movies. I mean, those aren't really like MCU style movies. This one kind of ironically is more that way, feels more that way. But those movies are like comedic enough in a sense, but where the amount of sort of parody they do, that I feel like that could work. I would be okay with that for the other Kingsman movies. I would let that slide. Not this one. Not the war drama movie. It didn't need that. But why are you giving an MCU introduction thing for like Hitler of all people? It's just such a weird tone to bounce to from like. The ending was sort of like serious but a little more hopeful of like, okay, they're gonna make sure the stuff in the war, that like generation of like lost soldiers, never happens again by starting the Kingsman organization and preventing another world war and stuff. And then you like introduce Hitler in that way, and it's like, are you gonna make one about World War II now? It just felt really bizarre. I hated that part for multiple reasons. Yeah, I'm glad this didn't get a sequel though. Like I said, it didn't need one. But yeah, it's weird for me to talk about this movie. I still don't really know how I feel about it. I feel like I liked it less than the first time I saw it, probably because like I didn't know about the plot twist. And I think the first time I watched this movie, I was basically treating it like a standalone movie because I hadn't seen the Kingsman movies in so long. I don't know if I even remembered if this was a prequel to Kingsman or if I just thought, oh, it's its own original movie called The Kingsman, you know. Like there's enough stuff on the poster where you see the logo in the background and everything, and like the font and the gold coloring where you look at it and know like, okay, this is related to the Kingsman's movies, but I might not have known. And I feel like it's just, yeah, this one's just better if you don't view it as part of that series, and if it's its own thing. I feel like it's just easier to watch that way. And if viewing it through that lens, I liked it and I could recommend it. But if you're watching it as part of like the Kingsman movies, I don't know. Like I said, it doesn't feel really connected, so I feel like you can honestly just watch the other two and then watch this one a bit later, and it just kind of works out nicely. But that's my thoughts on it. I thought I was going to be more positive on it, but like there was definitely stuff I liked, and I got into the like drama and I got kind of swept up into it and stuff, which was nice, but alright, bye bye.